There are new developments today in that High Court challenge to the federal government's Malaysia Solution that Chris Yeoman mentioned in that story. Australia's Human Rights Commission is now joining the action, and late today the court dismissed moves to have the Immigration Minister Chris Bowen appear to give evidence. Meanwhile, on Christmas Island, asylum seekers still await an uncertain fate. Local residents there fear more boat arrivals in the lead up to the High Court case, as National Affairs correspondent Heather Hewitt reports.
One after another, the boats keep coming to Christmas Island, packed with more than 250 asylum seekers so far since the Malaysia deal was signed, many of them unaccompanied minors. The uncertainty surrounding the High Court challenge has local authorities bracing for more.
So you think it might be a temptation for more boats to take advantage of this?
I think that's a possibility, yes.
There's probably one there on the horizon as we're talking. It's the people smugglers testing the mettle of the government, and we'll see what transpires.
We feel like we're the butt of policy.
The workers are saying that at the moment they don't know what's going to happen from hour to hour.
The confusion is taking its toll, not just on the latest arrivals, but on workers at the detention centre itself, which is no stranger to controversy since asylum seekers rioted there in March.
The workers have seen people banging their heads on the dirt within the middle of the compound in complete frustration at finding themselves subject to the Malaysia deal.
This in addition to growing reports of self-harm by detainees held at the centre for months. As these early shift workers wait to catch their bus at sunrise, they know they'll view more of what the Immigration Department refers to as incidents or disturbances. The union argues many of them are not adequately trained to deal with this.
Oh, look, there's a number of workers that have been brought up to Christmas Island to undertake training. Now, I don't know how the Department of Immigration is allowing untrained personnel into detention centres. It's clearly not allowable under the contract, but a young 18-year-old girl from Northern was brought up here and witnessed a man self-harming where he's cut his stomach and his intestines have come out, and that girl's now left Christmas Island, and I guess this is going to be with her for the rest of her life.
And this is the fact that we're trying to get across the diet. We really do want to know what's going on with members of our community, both inside and outside that detention centre. And it really is troubling to hear of stories like that.
Do you think staff are adequately trained to cope with this?
It would be difficult for anybody, I think, to cope with situations of self-harm, but I do think, or I do believe, as I'm advised, that the staff do get training in ways in which they should deal with those sorts of situations.
It's not clear whether that's also supposed to apply to dealing with detainees who dig their own graves.
People bury themselves up to their neck in the middle of the compounds as an act of desperation, I guess. There's one man who's dug himself a 6-foot deep grave in B2 compound, and he's been sleeping in there day and night on a regular basis. For the workers to have to go into the compound and spend over 12 hours a day watching a man in such a desperate situation is, something that Australia is not aware of. He's laid in there for weeks. The officers go to work every day and watch that.
As I'm advised, they do get proper training now, and they do get induction training when they come to the island, but they do actually receive better training than they were previously, yes.
So it wasn't the case before?
As I understand, there was some difficulty with the training that was provided.
The island administrator gets weekly briefings from the Department of Immigration and Serco, the company contracted to manage the centre. While the department insists training is on track, a recent inquiry by Comcare, the government's workplace safety watchdog, has found otherwise. In a damning report, it points to systematic undertraining and lack of preparation to deal with the constant threat of violence, protests and self-harm.
I guess the workers come and debrief with me sometimes over these matters because they find it very hard to come home from work at the end of the day, turn on the television and find what they call a whole load of bulldust that's put out by the Immigration Department.
Well, I understand they all have to sign confidentiality agreements. and that probably would mean that they would be bound not to talk about what goes on in the centre because of the requirement for confidentiality.
Does that mean there's perhaps not enough transparency?
I think transparency is really a matter for the Department of Immigration rather than Serco, of course, and to say there's not enough transparency would again perhaps be something that would preempt what the Parliament might determine ultimately.
What about these people here that are bearing the impact of Australia? We're the front line. We're bearing the impact for what Australia won't accept.
There is a code of silence on this island amongst workers fearful of losing their jobs. In the current climate, none are prepared to take the risk to appear on camera. But privately, they say they're angry and deeply frustrated with the Immigration Department and Serco, the company running the detention centre that's so changed the way of life here. While views are mixed about the impact of the centre on this small island that's closer to Indonesia than the Australian mainland and a favourite of the naturalist David Attenborough, there's no doubting a nostalgia for the past. 20 years ago, asylum seekers were handled in a very different fashion.
When the boats came in, people used to get clothing. The Malay community, the Chinese community, Europeans used to get bags of clothing. From the jetty, they were bussed down to the community hall, and there's like 2 policemen on duty sort of thing, and you'd have about 300 people sometimes, and they'd be all taken down to the community hall. Just mattresses on the floor. People used to sleep in the morning, and the baker used to make hot cross buns. And during that time, there'd be a big rustle around in the community for bags of clothing, toys for the kids.
Then they'd be flown to the mainland for processing. Today, for some in the community, like hotels and restaurants, the detention centre means business is booming. Others worry about damage to the island's sensitive environment and the famed native island crabs suffering from heavy road traffic.
Look, a lot of people say that life has changed on Christmas Island, that the idyllic lifestyle that they were used to before the detention centre has gone. But as I've said to a lot of the members of the community, change is inevitable.
In one form or another, the detention centre looks as though it's here to stay. There are more government inquiries due to report shortly on its operations and others around the country. What many locals here are hoping for is that at the very least, the recommendations will produce greater transparency and regular scrutiny.
Until you've got a situation where there is no fear of people losing their job or contractors losing their contract, you'll never get the right story. And that in itself, for Australia in 2011, is a bloody disgrace. Excuse me.
And on the High Court challenge to the Malaysia Solution, the full bench is expected to sit in hearing next week.